do, and I've done this as well, is you'll write a very long melody, and then you'll vary it a little bit the next line, and then by the third line you're on to a new melody, and it's like, well, that's not repetition. Now again, that's not the tendency of easily memorable songs. The tendency is a short melody, like hello, what song I'm singing, right? All I said was one word and 2 notes. But these other songs, sometimes in our lives, how simple is that? Dun, 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 dun. Very straight melody, goes up, and then it goes down. And the word is just some. Like, how often have you written a melody where it's that short, where it's just one word isolated? I think the key to walk away with here is rest space. Do you give your listener rest space? Try writing a melody like that, just for the sake of it. And, you'll educate yourself, too, on, that's funny. I do that longer thing. That's okay, too. But then, own it. That's what I do. I do the longer phrase thing. And that's part of what makes me, me. But then, get real, How easily is it going to be for us to remember it? Maybe for you, you've got a you're an artist. You're not trying to get other people to sing your songs and be able to sing them. You actually sing very well, and you captivate your audience because of the many strengths that you have. So I'm not saying that your melodies have to be short, they have to repeat, and they have to follow that simple structure. Not at all. But it's something to look at, to try to establish what do you do that's truly your own, and then examine how that holds up. So the next thing, that's number one, melodic motif. The next thing is contrast. When you have a clearly defined melodic motif that you are repeating, what that means is it's easier to write the chorus section that contrasts with that. Have you ever had that trouble? You get to the chorus and you have this sense that you want it to be something. There's something great that it can be, but you've tried a number of different things and it just doesn't seem to be complementing the verse, doing something different enough. You might look to that. Did I clearly distinguish a melody in the verse so that I can do something different in the next section? Again, if you look at highly commercial music, there's huge contrast between the sections, which comes from a clearly distinguished motif to begin with. So we'll often find that we can create contrast through 3 different ways. So melody, harmony, lyrics, certainly rhythm is a part of this. But I put down 5 melody. There's 5 basic melodic ways to create contrast. The phrase length. So the length of your melodic motif. Do you sing all the way through that first line and it's 2 measures long? Or is it 1 measure long? Or is it 2 beats out of a 4-beat measure? So we'll often hear commercial music go from a 2 measure long phrases in the verse to a little pre-chorus where it has dun, 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 short, lots of rest space, very short phrases. So that then you can go back and create contrast again in the chorus with long melodic phrases again. Again, that's the tendency of highly commercial music. Note length, big one. I'm standing on a bridge, I'm waiting in the dark, short notes, right? And then in the chorus, dun 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 dun, long notes, right? So again, highly commercial music has huge contrast. That's a very, very easy one to deal with, and just recognize, okay, one day a activity that you could give yourself as a songwriter is to say, I'm going to try to write extreme contrast. The greater the contrast, sometimes the more memorable the sections will be, the more refreshed we will feel. So you could say, I'm going to write a short note verse down here in pitch and a long note chorus up here in pitch. And you just use 2 very typical and effective contrasting elements to do that. Pitch, I just talked about. Again, a highly commercial way of doing things would be lower pitch in the verse, higher pitch in the chorus. A tendency certainly not something that you have to adhere to. Position. This is a really big one, and it's so subtle. Get back. So is Jojo was a man who thought he was a loner. So where did I start that? Jojo. It's on the downbeat, right? Highly commercial songs change where the melodic phrase begins at the beginning of each song section. Notice how the chorus is 2, 3. Get back. Get back. So you will find this over and over and over again in highly commercial music. There will be a change in where the phrase starts. Now if you layer these techniques, if you not only start your melodic motif in a different beat of the measure, and we generally, you can even, if you don't speak theory, you know, which is fine for a songwriter, generalize it. Say, well, I'm feeling this very, it's like starts when I start playing. And I'm feeling this other one is like I sing and then I play. It was before the measure starts. Or it seems like I always play and then I sing. Which is another tendency you might notice, that with you tend to go back to your typical ways of writing. So you play and then you sing. And if you notice every section is like this, man, it's hard to work against that and write what you feel is a very catchy, hooky, or commanding our attention once again, chorus. Because you're making choices without thinking that are slowly shutting doors of opportunity. So when you can keep those ideas in mind, then you have more control over that idea of contrast. And then the last thing I said was shape. And if we look at the shape of songs here, as far as the melody goes, we'll often be able to generalize those too. In Lean on Me.
Ну не надо петь просто.
Sometimes in our lives we all have pain. You know, we all have sorrow. It's do-do-do-do. So, if you take out some staff paper, or just whatever way you want to do this, map out your melody. I like to do it in terms of making lines. The shorter the line, the shorter the note, and then it just shows the shape. Really doesn't matter what exact pitches you're singing, I think, as far as a melody goes. Map out the shape. When you get to a contrasting section, if you notice, you've got lean on me when you're not strong. You know, if it's all the same, then we have a problem. I think there's a reason it's lean on me when you're not strong. It's a different shape. It's an octave up too, which helps create contrasting pitch. Okay, more on contrast. Harmony. Certainly we don't want to dwell on melody the entire time, particularly if you tend to have talent in harmony and groove. And that's where you solve your problems. As far as songs go. Many times I find that as songwriters we're constantly like, what chord can I go to? It's all about, I don't know enough chords, give me chords. And if I think about, you know, some of my favorite songs, it's not as if they're just loaded with the more complex the chords, the more I like the song. No. So it's simplicity, right? Repetition. Once again, just like melodic motif, you have to establish what it is before you can contrast with what it is. And so beware of things like using too many different chords in a single section. You know, there's beauty in simplicity. Songwriters who know more chords than I know, and artists, Stevie Wonder, John Mayer, I mean, they're commercial and memorable and what I believe very beautiful songs, often rely on very simple chord structures. Maybe until we get to a bridge where you can break it out and really take it somewhere else. But again, you have to establish what it is. So what does that mean? Talking not just abstractly, but maybe that means that you look at your own songs and you realize, again, you're involving a lot of different chords in a single section. So if you think about that, well, how do I contrast with that? Like I already kind of provided this movement in the verse, hard to contrast. What if you challenged yourself to write a one chord groove in the verse, and that's all you could do? Boy, there'd be a lot of places to go for your next section, right? What if it was a 2-chord groove? Another thing, though, to think about is how frequently do you change chords? And often, as songwriters, again, if we're holding our guitar in our hand or playing piano or something, we're relying on what comes naturally. So those are our tendencies. And if our tendency is to change chords every measure, you can imagine you're probably playing about the same tempo as you typically do. That's going to close off doors of opportunity again. It's going to prompt you to sing at the same rate, and then all of your songs begin to have those same elements. So look at how you might be able to access the idea of chord frequency. How about changing chords 2 times per measure and see what that does to create a new groove for yourself. I think chord frequency is interesting. Also with contrast then. If you change chords twice a measure in your verse, I mean, man, if you do that for the whole song, that's going to be a one frantic chord heavy tune. Maybe then in the pre-chorus you change once per measure. And then you go back in the chorus to your initial feel. Look for how you're using contrast. And again, hold that up to songs you love and how they use chords. And honestly, if transcribing a song in terms of what chords are they using, if that very idea prevents you from ever sitting down and doing it, don't worry about what chords are being played. Map out how frequently the chords change. Get yourself some staff paper and make a little mark every beginning of the measure where a chord changes. And then you begin to see that structure, how that's playing out. Contrast as far as the lyric, there's wonderful tools to designing the content of our lyric and making sure that we get contrast in that way too. So the chorus delivers the main message. So we often have more big thought, feeling, telling, summarizing language there, which contrasts with verses where we tend to say, here's the detail, here's what really happened, here's a small moment that proves that big thought that I'm saying is true and real. So there's contrast in the way that we deal with lyric. The third idea, repetition. Okay, again, when and how much? Have you ever taken a song that you really love by another artist and mapped out how often the title phrase or where the title phrase occurs? Or if there's repetition within the language, for example, how do you complete phrases? Does line 1 complete the phrase with line 2 and it's a full sentence? Noticing things like that, consistencies in the language, always starting with the verb and finishing the thought, can be a wonderful way to make your lyric easier to take in. We should always read your lyric out loud and make sure that it's understandable. I'm not saying that it should read like a story, certainly not all lyric does that. But if we're asking our listener to sort of be a detective and finish it off and add the pronouns and add the prepositions and conjunctions, it's very, very hard to do that while we're experiencing all the information musically that's coming at us. Don't ask your listener to fill in the blanks. Say what you need. Harmony and groove, number 4. I talked about tempo and how sitting down with your instrument you might predispose yourself to sort of starting with those same tempos, which results in the same groove, same frequency with which you're changing chords. Those unconscious decisions are resulting in a style that's wonderful, that's you. But if that's all you're doing as an artist, that gets frustrating. One exercise we have in a course called Writing from the Title is we choose a title, and then throughout the week, songwriters will set that title at different tempos. And at first, that sounds, okay, I don't know if that's particularly interesting or not, but by the end of the week, man, some huge realizations come out. Some of them are certainly that, wow, I just assumed the title needed to be at a particular tempo, and the song developed from there. But when we try it at slower tempos or vastly faster tempos, we start to think about things that title can mean that we never thought before. So that can be a really cool technique, but that's one thing that I mean by tempo. Instrumental groove, you always choose the same groove. I recently went in and got real, number 4. I talked about tempo and how sitting down with your instrument you might predispose yourself to sort of starting with those same tempos, which results in the same groove, same frequency with which you're changing chords, and those unconscious decisions are resulting in a style that's wonderful, that's you. But if that's all you're doing as an artist, that gets frustrating. One exercise we have in a course called Writing from the Title is we choose a title, and then throughout the week, songwriters will set that title at different tempos. And at first, that sounds, okay, I don't know if that's particularly interesting or not. But by the end of the week, man, some huge realizations come out. Some of them are certainly that, wow, I just assumed the title needed to be at a particular tempo, and the song developed from there. But when we try it at slower tempos or vastly faster tempos, we start to think about things that title can mean that we never thought before. So that can be a really cool technique, but that's one thing that I mean by tempo. Instrumental groove, you always choose the same groove. I recently went in and got real about my own lack of vocabulary when it came to guitar. And so I went on a mad search to try to find, what can I do about that? I think just facing those issues is overwhelming. There's so much to do as a songwriter that it's hard to know what to farm out and what to do yourself. But I think as a writer, that was a major area where I was not inspired. Had to figure out what to do. Chord frequency, we talked about that, and there's some song examples there. Lyric, when it comes to lyric, many times sensory lyric writing, having the ability to write with a sensory element, so taste, touch, sight, sound, smell, and movement, is some serious power as a writer. Many times we will say, well, I'm not trying to write country music, because we often use that kind of language in country. They smell and move with a sensory element, so taste, touch, sight, sound, smell, and movement, is some serious power as a writer. Many times we will say, well, I'm not trying to write country music, because we often use that kind of language in country. It's all over the place, though. Pop, hip-hop, huge in hip-hop. It's presented a little differently, but it's all there. And when you have the capacity to write with highly sensory language, you know then when you're going to say something more generalized or thought-feeling, it's actually good language, and it really belongs there.
Hi, I'm Sean Levine. I'm a writer, an artist, and editor.
Hey everyone. Whoops. It's Friday. I have this thing on my nose here. I smashed my nose and cut it the other day. Pretty funny. I was going down to feed the dog, and the dog's crate, Moose's crate, was it was dark, and my nose started bleeding, and my wife said, "Get over it." I talked about it in my last video. So anyways, I'm recovering from that. Actually, it hurt a lot. Discount code for today's video is RB200, 60% off my piano book bundle. I haven't sold that here in a few weeks. It's 700-page PDF. Music theory. It's got Instagram transcriptions in it. It's got YouTube transcriptions in it.
Вижу, когда-то... Ну нет, ну нормально.
And then 40% off my quick lessons. That's my new guitar course. If you guys are guitar players, there's I think 28 or 29 lessons in it now. You pay once, and then I just keep adding lessons to it. So it's a really great deal. And then my ear training course, so you can figure out any of this stuff by ear, is also 40% off with the discount code is RB200. Okay. We go over a lot of this kind of material. I like to go back and talk about theoretical concepts about music, but it's not really theory. It's just things to know to improve your music, improve your ears, improve your general knowledge about what you're hearing. No matter what kind of music it is, it doesn't matter if it's pop music, if it's metal, if it's hip hop, if it's rock. It doesn't matter. Music theory is the same for everything. But there's certain what I say as assumed knowledge or so, like things that you should just basic concepts you should know. But we'll talk about those, and we'll talk about some more sophisticated ones for those of you that aren't beginners, because I like to mix all the things together because some of the things are not obvious. Okay, so let's just talk about a few terms to start with. Some of you, probably a lot of you know these, but chord tones. You hear me talk about these. These are just the notes that make up a chord. 1, 3, 5, and 7. It's a 7th chord. And these are non-chord tones, 2, 4, 6, or I say 9, 11, 13. Okay. So if I put my little keyboard here on the screen, this app is called Chordy for those of you that want to know what this is. So if I take these notes, I start on C, those are the notes of the C major scale, right? They're just all the white notes. If I take the first note, third note, fifth note of the scale, it gives me a C major chord. That's when I say 1, 3, 5. That's a major triad here. Now if it said 1 flat 3, 5, I would flat the middle note and you'd get a C minor chord. If I take 1, 3, 5 and I add a 7th on it, that would be called a C major 7. Okay. Now any other notes of the scale that are remaining are called non-chord tones. Non-chord tones are great. We also call them color tones, because they make your music colorful, or haunting tones, I like to say. If I'm on a minor chord and I have to like a 6, it gives it a melody. That flat 6 wants to notes always want to there. Not always, but many times they step is. So I have this C sus4, that F, which is the 11th to the 4th, wants to resolve third, meaning
Нет,
the
понял. Ну,
third note of the scale. Okay, so when you hear a sustain after resolve, you can just hang on. You can have C sus chord, you can have C sus with F in the bass, you can have C sus D minor at the end of the bass, but it's a different chord, it's D minor 11. Okay, now these little chord tones are notes that need to be used carefully. They're also the most interesting notes that you hear. But when you are writing a melody or hearing a melody, typically melodies that are melodic are mostly chord tones. Okay? So I'm going to give you some simple rules about using these things. If you use non-chord tones in your melody, it becomes difficult to harmonize a melody. Especially the sixth. Okay? If I have a C major chord and I have this note A, there's not really not a good note. You want to hear da, right? That A, yeah, you could harmonize that note A. What are you going to harmonize it with? F or that F? Well, that's really sounds like an F major chord. So it's not really good harmony. The sixth is a very weak note because it does not harmonize well. If you're writing a melody and you say, "Oh, my harmony doesn't sound good," it's probably because you have the sixth in the melody. Okay. You want to have mainly chord tone melodies. I'm talking about for any kind of music that sounds melodic. If it's based on a chord progression, if you use the chord tones, you're going to be safe. Okay. Now you're like, okay, well, how do I know what chord tones are in what chord? Well, this is the whole theory thing that I was talking about. You got to basically know how to build major and minor chords, right? You got to know how to build seventh chords, just like how they're constructed. In my book, the first chapter talks about intervals. The first section is intervals. How do you name an interval? Interval